Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name's Joel Barnett and I am your host. And in today's episode, I'm doing a re-catch up with Amy Downie from Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. Amy was last on the podcast only about 6 months ago in April for episode 236. And it's worth having a listen to that if you haven't before listening to this one, just because you learn about what she's done building up to her career to where she is now. And she was also talking about the reason for this chat, which is because of an expedition that she went on with part of the Botanic Gardens, along with Threatened Species Conservancy, to get some seeds off a eucalypt that's endangered. So once I'd heard that she'd done it and was back, I was keen to get her on to talk about it and find out what it was like. And yeah, I just find it fascinating that the amount of different parts of horticulture that there is. And once again, I just love talking to people who love what they do, and Amy's certainly one of them. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Amy Downie. Amy, thank you very much for coming back on the podcast. It was about 6 months ago you were on, and you were talking about, there was a section you were talking about where you were saying there was a potential trip you might go on, and it sounded like it was potentially years away. You had to do a lot more training for it. And then you've a couple of weeks ago, you just got back from, I think it was going to be a 300-meter uh, hillside. And I
Yep.
think you mentioned that there was like an endangered eucalypt it was going to see that. Is that
Yes. Wow,
right?
good memory because that was 6 months or so ago.
I did listen about 7 hours ago to that podcast as a reminder.
I see.
Memory's not that good.
No, but you're spot on. That was yeah, so I just got back last week was my first week back after this absolutely insane and incredible trip. And we were just saying before, I can't even believe that it happened because even before chatting with you, it had sort of been in the works and wondering if we could kind of get it across the line and make it happen, and we did, which is incredible. But yeah, pretty much the gist of it was myself and one of my colleagues, Ollie Sherlock, went, and this was a huge project that was sort of in collaboration with Threatened Species Conservancy and lots of other parties. But Threatened Species Conservancy and Stan organised the trip, and it was to go to Woodbilliga National Park in New South Wales to collect an endangered species that was growing on, you're right, a 300-meter cliff face there, which was insane. And we ended up having to go down 90 meters on one of the days to collect it, which was amazing. Yeah. So I ended up actually bringing two lots of rope with us because we didn't have enough rope to make it all the way down. So connecting two lots of rope to make it possible to get there.
Got to make sure you tie it properly.
Yeah, that's why Ollie came. Ollie is the expert. He's got all the knots and everything down pat. So he was incredible at sort of setting up all the ropes and heading down and creating a really nice pathway for us. There's sort of a lot to explain, but obviously this is a cliff face that had never been climbed on before. So there was lots of sort of dense vegetation and fallen logs and rocks to kind of scramble over and a little bit crumbly too. So Ollie sort of had to go down and push his way through these dense sort of shrubs and things and find a nice sort of pathway so that then I could come down with all the collecting gear and the big pole hopper and the seed bags and everything that we needed, which was quite a lot of stuff. Kind of he had to create a clear pathway for me to be able to get through. So he had a very tough job, Ollie, but he did very brilliant. And again, he carried all the ropes, all the climbing gear, everything, which was heavy work.
So how many of you, was it just the two of you there?
No, so as I sort of mentioned, Threatened Species Conservancy, this is actually their project. They're the ones who've organised it. So there was a team of Stan was sort of the project leader from Threatened Species Conservancy. And then he also had Mitch with him, who is also working with Threatened Species Conservancy. And then with them as well, they had a previous intern and a volunteer come along. Her name was Cherish, and she was incredible. So they were sort of at the top with radios, connecting with us, checking in with us, also collecting and surveying at the top of the cliff face as well. And then as part of that team too, we had a local expert, Jackie, who came along with us, who lives just at the bottom of Woodbilliga National Park. And also we had the New South Wales Park Ranger. I think his title is actually conservation officer or something like that. So Andrew, who also came along on two of the days, both him and Jackie came along with us, and it was again this kind of huge project where we all kind of had to meet up in the morning. We, along with TSC, which is Threatened Species Conservancy, did sort of camping and we're staying together. And then we would meet up with Jackie and Andrew in the morning and have to do kind of this crazy four-wheel driving, which I'd never done before either. And Ollie had to teach me. I was just kind of learning at the time, which was also amazing. And he was so incredibly patient and brave to be going with me, to be honest. But it was awesome. The only access we had was sort of going through a little bit of private property and private land, and then on these really not super kept fire trails. Like they're not very often traveled, if at all, to be honest. So really sort of steep fire trails, which had eroded out in some parts and had sticks and branches growing across them. And we had chainsaws and things with us so that if we ever needed to kind of clear the road, we could. And so Jackie and Andrew kind of led the way a lot of the time to the site. And they actually ended up extending the known location for the Eucalyptus stenostoma. They found another sort of area where it was growing as well, which was sort of beyond the known location where they thought it originally was. So that was amazing. That was super cool for them to do.
How did they find out that it was growing there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So more, I guess, my information that I know is sort of with the project. So with Threatened Species Conservancy, they organized this project and they got funding from, actually, I should get this right, from the New South Wales Environmental Trust to go in after the 2019-2020 bushfires. Do you remember they had those really nasty bushfires up in New South
I
Wales?
think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so that burnt all through Wadbilliga and Dua National Park. And then, so sort of post those fires, TSC went and they had, I think, a couple people go up there and check what had been affected by the fires. And so, obviously, this eucalypt was one of the ones that was really badly burnt and affected at the top of this cliff face. And why it was so badly affected and why it's now endangered is because it doesn't regenerate from fire. So it doesn't regenerate from a lignotuber or epicormic growth. So that makes it really tricky once the fire had sort of burnt through all this really mature trees and a lot of them had died. The only ones that were left that were surviving and that had seed on them, which is what we were going to collect and survey, were down on this cliff face. So they were able to see that. And then from there, it kind of became this question of how are we going to access that? But also, that was a few years prior. So I think they've been on this journey of they've gone now a couple times to site to see how things are doing. Again, we were only involved in collecting the eucalypt, but they were collecting multiple different species in those national parks. But a lot of them weren't growing on cliff faces. It was just this eucalypt that was.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's kind of how it naturally evolved. I think that they had this project in mind, this really important project that after the bushfires, they needed to go and check on things in the national park. Once they sort of knew what was going on and knew what they were faced with, then it was sort of this journey of like, okay, how are we going to access this eucalypt? Like that's sort of our biggest challenge. I think the fear was because there is new seedlings coming up, which is great. But the fear is that if another bushfire sort of comes through now, we don't have the backup that we need. And we obviously don't want the species to go extinct. So that was kind of the thought for them. And then that's kind of how we got involved. So I think I remember speaking with you last time about I had just got back from a conference in Singapore where I spoke about escarpment horticulture and our journey into climbing and hosting sort of a ex situ collection of threatened and endangered species on our escarpment. And so from there was somebody who attended the talk that I gave, and they were in connection with Stan, who's the project leader, and he had mentioned to them what was going on and if they knew anybody. And so then they connected us
Oh,
together.
cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of an amazing journey into how we were able to be involved and to assist them. And it's so incredible actually that they asked us, and we're so happy that we were able to assist. And again, I definitely want to give my climbing partner Ollie a lot of credit here, because when I was asked, obviously this is still something that is a little new to me and I'm still figuring out. Ollie, I reached out to Ollie, who is at the Royal Botanic Gardens, but the Cranbourne site. So he is a natural systems officer at Cranbourne. So he's got a really amazing job actually, where he sort of works with bushfire management, managing the whole bushland there, which is a huge job. And there's only a crew of two of them, which is insane. And then also he's also a snake handler and like has all the best first aid training in the world. So I thought, what a perfect person to bring with me.
Yeah.
But he's also like a hobby rock climber. So he's an amazing rock climber and abseiler, and he's been doing it for 15 years and, is part of or was part of the Melbourne Rock Climbing Club, and has been in the SES and all these things. So I really couldn't have done it. And I don't think I would have maybe got it over the line without Ollie being there. But his experience was amazing. And then we were able to sort of work together leading up to it. And he trained me a lot as well leading up to it in different techniques that we might be able to use. Again, because it was a site we normally you would probably have a bit more of an idea of where you're going or what the site is going to look like before you go climbing. But because we'd never been there, we weren't quite sure what we were faced with. So we needed to be prepared sort of for everything and for every scenario and every sort of type of cliff face that we could potentially come across. So again, Ollie was just amazing at being prepared for everything and training me to do the same, I guess.
So what sort of degrees is the cliff face? Like I assume it changes over such a big long distance, but like how much of it is like straight up and down?
Yeah, yeah. So that was sort of a rule with us, because again, the escarpment isn't like a 180 or however you say, like a hanging cliff face. So we did agree that for this trip, I'm not super experienced with the hanging stuff. So if it got to the point of just hanging in the air and then having to get back up from that was going to be sort of the trouble, because you can't go all the way down and then walk your way back up. It's just too big and there's a river at the bottom. So we sort of had a limit of like no hanging. So this was probably, gosh, I got to work out my degrees here. Steep enough that you have to have rope, like you could not do it without it. Probably, so that's 180.
So like 45 degrees would be.
Yeah, yeah, maybe a little bit steeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I should find out actually, the actual degrees, because that would be really helpful.
It
Yeah,
obviously change a lot though. Like there'd be
you're
steeper bits
right.
and
You're right. Bits are steeper and some bits aren't as steep, but no hanging in the air, but you have to be connected. Like it's too steep, you would just fall straight off and bounce down the bottom if you didn't have ropes. But but what it meant was that we were able to kind of use something that we call a gree. So it's a system that we use to get down the ropes, which is a really easy kind of mechanical system that you just kind of pull a lever and it takes you down. But it's saying that I still had to learn, because if you put it on the wrong way, you just slide through the rope and it doesn't catch you. So a great system, but one to practice. But again, it meant that getting back up the rope, we could use what we call a hand ascender. And so it's again a sort of mechanical piece that allows you to just move it up the rope and then it holds if you pull down on it. And so even though it was very steep, we sort of using that were able to scramble back up these really steep cliffs using sort of the rope and this ascender and holding ourselves, and yeah, again holding all the material and everything like that. That was the best system we found to be able to sort of do that. So I think it would definitely be different. And again, that's the goal eventually, to get to the full on hanging and be able to do that and still climb back up the rope too. But because we sort of had this not 100% hanging cliff face, we were able to use these techniques that were really easy. Yeah. And again, these mechanical devices, which made it really easy too.
And how hard is it to go sideways? Like if you've got to sort of line up where you're going to go down, and if you're
Yeah.
5 meters away, is it? I assume it's not that easy because you've got other
No.
brush in the way.
Yeah. So again, poor Ollie, he carried multiple ropes with him. So on the day we went down 90 meters, we also then had to, because you're right, if you kind of trying to go across, oftentimes you would just swing back if you, again, it was very unsteady under your foot. So very risky to kind of be leaning across and then potentially go flying back into a tree. So Ollie actually set up anchor with the rope anchors sideways across to where we wanted to get to. And then so he had anchor points all along the way, and we created a prusik that we just sort of move along that rope. So the same thing, if you fall, you're just falling to the closest anchor. You're not falling all the way back to where you've originally climbed down. So it's a lot of sort of clipping on and off to different systems safely. But that again was an amazing skill that Ollie had that I was so grateful for because I wasn't quite sure how to do that either. So being able to actually set up a system, again, Ollie went ahead of me and created this rope that reached all the way to the tree that we needed to get to, which was again, a fair few meters from us. And then I could come along with all the climbing gear and get to that too.
And what was
Which
he anchoring into? Was it
Yeah, so we had with us like nuts and cams and also slings. So it was whatever we could find. We ended up using a lot of stumps of like old burnt trees, but stable, testing them first. Yeah, a little scary, but I trust Ollie and he definitely was testing them and making sure. And again, that's another one of the sort of fun challenges of like, okay, we do have these stumps that normally, you would definitely feel safe to anchor around the base of a tree if you have to. That's obviously not ideal because you don't want to do any damage on the trees and leave sort of any impact. But sometimes that's sort of a necessary anchor. But yeah, having that challenge of okay, well actually this tree's been burnt and it's dead now, and is this going to hold us? That was something that we sort of just had to assess case by case and stump by stump. And some of them held and some of them weren't so stable. So some of them were around stumps of trees, some of them were nuts in sort of the cracks of rocks or big, not boulders, but big rocks that were down there. You had to get a bit creative. It was whatever you could sort of find. And again, because we didn't know what we were going to find down there, Ollie brought lots of gear with him to sort of be prepared for anything. But that was amazing. And actually, I have to share a story because I just have a memory of that again of Ollie creating these anchor points again from almost nothing, it felt like, from a little crack on the cliff or a little stump that's there. And then he sort of got to this big tree that we were aiming for, and it was growing diagonally, like straight sideways out of the cliff face and then up. And it was massive. It had a really big trunk on it and it hadn't been there, but it was growing just straight out and up. And below it was nothing. Like that was just sheer cliff face below. And so I sort of get there and I was setting up with our like GPS and all the information that I need to write down when we're collecting the seed. And so I'm setting up all the stuff and I look out and Ollie is climbing, like walking up this diagonal tree trunk to reach up to get the seed. Like he's full on walking up this tree with nothing below him, just attached to the anchor point back behind me. It's just insane, just fearless, like no fear in him.
Yeah. Well, you have to do something like that.
I think so too. I think as well, he's been doing it for so long, he just trusts his ability and trusts the systems that he's built so much, which is amazing. But I can believe it. I was definitely like clinging to the cliff for sure, being like, oh, that's okay, you get it.
So were you doing any collecting there for for the other team as well, or like they didn't know what
Yeah.
was down there? So
Yes, yes. So and I should mention as well when we were talking about collaborators who were on the trip, these Eurobodalla Botanic Gardens, they weren't on the trip, but Threatened Species Conservancy with this project, they were collaborating with the Eurobodalla Botanic Garden. So the material and the seed that they were collecting of the eucalypt and the other species they were going to collect are all going to be given and were given to Eurobodalla Botanic Gardens to grow on as a backup collection at their garden, but also to store the seed in their seed bank as well. And so very similar to that. So that was sort of threatened species side. So we were collecting for them as well. But then they also offered for us to have some seed too. So we collected the seed that we are now going to grow on at the Botanic Gardens in the city, the Melbourne site. So that will go on my escarpment and we'll actually get to sort of give it its natural loving environment of growing on a mini cliff face. And then we'll also grow it on at Cranbourne in the Australian garden too. And then the same thing. So we took some cuttings as well of some leaves and branches and the seeds, and that will be a herbarium specimen that we give to the New South Wales Herbarium, like a pressing, and along with some seed as well for them to have in their seed bank because it's a New South Wales species. And so obviously at the Botanic Gardens, we do have a Victorian herbarium and seed bank too. So that will also be contributed to again as a backup, but it's more for New South Wales because it's, yeah, naturally occurs in New South Wales. So that's sort of the thought. Yeah, sorry.
So what was the timing like, knowing that you were going to be able to get like seeds at the time you went? Like, how
Yeah,
did you know that?
yeah. So that was all again, Stan, who is the project organizer. That was something that I think he's been in charge of this project now for 1 to 2 years, but he had already been the previous year and he had sort of noted two main times. This was the great time to collect seed, but then also earlier in autumn could have been another good time to go. So he sort of gave us the option of when we would like to come along with him. But he had already been to site the year prior, so he knew that this was the right time. And he also knows this species very well and has done a lot of research on it. So he was very confident that there was going to be seed there. I think that the biggest challenge that we had and we knew we were going to face was obviously these are trees. And so even some of the ones that were burnt on the top of the cliff face were still standing, but reaching or getting to the seed was the biggest challenge. And I think when he'd been previously, that's what he had noted of like, how are we going to reach this? And even on the cliff face, how are you going to reach the seed if the cliff is going, the tree is going sideways out of this cliff?
Yeah.
So that was something else that we sort of had to prepare for and think about too, and come up with a sort of system to use as well.
So how did you get like those?
So we ended up using we brought along quite a long sort of pole lopper with a cover so it wouldn't cut our rope on the way down. So we had a massive pole lopper and we did collect some seed from the Eucalypts along with Threatened Species Conservancy and the park ranger and Jackie. We all went on the first day and had a look at the top of the cliff face and used the pole lopper to see if we could get or reach any of the seed up there, which we were successful in getting some, which was amazing. Some of it was like standing precariously on the back of the ute on this sort of steep fire trail, but with the big group of us that were there, we were actually able to collect quite a lot. But so on the cliff face again, so the challenge was obviously reaching the seed that was growing at the very top of the tree always. It's never easy and it's never on a low down branch. And then the other sort of challenge we were facing was that if once we chop it, it's just going to fall down the cliff face. How are we going to get
Yeah.
it? So amazingly, I was collaborating with our ARB team, our arboriculture team at my work before we went, and I was discussing this with them. And Peter Burby had this amazing system where you use a throw line. So they often use throw lines and throw bags it's like a thin line that they throw into the tree to eventually get their climbing line up there. So it's very thin, it's very light, and the throw bags are kind of weighted so they come down the other side. So the system that we used was using I hope I can explain this right. So we used our extension pole lopper, which extended to meters and meters. It was really long. We would hook the throw line with the throw bag, so the weighted throw bag over the end of that, place it over the branch, hook the throw bag back into, so usually Ollie would be doing that and I'm waiting for the line to come back into me. And then you tie a little knot called an alpine butterfly and untie the throw bag and put the other end of the line through that knot and then cinch it onto the branch. So then I'm holding the branch and it's cinched and it's able to actually keep a hold if it falls. But it's the kind of knot too that if something happens and you get stuck or you can't chop the branch or whatever it is, you can just simply let go of one end and pull that back to you. You're not tangled or knotted on the branch, which a lot of different ways that we tried, that was the problem of we would get it up there and then for some reason we were tangled or it's too thick of a branch and we couldn't cut it. This was just when we were practicing. and then we couldn't get the line back, and so we'd have to cut the line. So Pete had this amazing way of allowing us again to sort of hold on to the branch, but if it wasn't working or for whatever reason we had to change, we could just undo it ourselves without having to walk out onto the branch or cut the line or anything.
That's
So we've got an amazing photo actually that I'll have to show you of me sort of holding. We kind of found a lovely perch on one of the cliff faces, and I'm sort of holding the line, and Ollie's then using the pole lopper to cut this branch, and it's sort of an action shot, and it's awesome to see because it's such a cool system.
yeah. I was going to ask if anyone was taking photos or videos of the area.
Yeah, thank goodness Stan was again the trip organizer, and he was very organized. He had this amazing camera, which took really quality photos, which was awesome. And we tried to take some too. It was a little risky getting your phone out while you were doing there, but I got some cool ones. I did get a video of Ollie kind of scrambling up that tree, which I was really happy about, and some cool sort of lookout shots and ones of the tree. And there was a couple trees with flowers, not many, but some photos of the ukes and a GoPro with me too. But unfortunately, when I looked back at the footage, it's all just kind of, I had it sort of in a chest pocket and it's all just the cliff and like my hands and my rope and like nothing of the view, nothing of the Eucalypt. So that was a shame. I was hoping I might get some cool climbing ones, but there was climbing, but it was just way too close to see anything.
Yeah. And how many seeds? Like, did you have a goal of how many seeds you were going to get, and how many did you
There,
get?
that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if there was a goal specifically on how many seeds, because within sort of the fruit is a lot of like little seeds. It's quite an amazing fruit actually as well, where it's sort of a beautiful, really round fruit with sort of no lip on it. But I think more the goal was that we were trying to collect from, I think it was 14 different specimens,
Oh,
different
wow.
trees, and get seed from again 14 different trees. And a lot of those trees did end up being at the top of the cliff, which was good too. And I think we were able to get four different trees down the cliff face. And so Threatened Species Conservancy ended up going to the second national park and getting a few from that national park as well from the top of the cliff face, which was great. But we did have, so again, TSC organised all of the collecting permits and everything, which is quite a big job. And so definitely within the permits, there's only so much seed you are allowed to collect. So we had to sort of stick within that, but I don't even think we came close to that number in a good way.
Yep.
Yeah, but there is some sort of, there's definitely guidelines of how much you're allowed to collect and not going beyond that, and definitely being responsible in leaving, as much seed as possible on the trees that are surviving and that are doing well, only sort of taking what you need, small bits. But in saying that, within one of the fruits is a lot of seed and, a lot of potential plants that will come from that. So we have way more than we need, and again to be stored in the seed bank, but also we hope now to sort of open this up to other botanic gardens and other gardens that would like to grow this eucalypt as well, again as another sort of backup collection or backup species in a sense for these endangered ones that are growing naturally in Wadbilliga. So we're glad that we've got sort of a little bit extra to be stored away in a couple of seed banks, but then also to be shared with other gardens too. That's kind of the goal as well.
Yeah. Was there an insane amount of paperwork that needed to be done prior to going? I assume there
Yes,
was.
absolutely. And I mean, I can't even speak again for TSC, Threatened Species Conservancy. Like they have done so much work on this, and in some way I'm very grateful that we were sort of able to come in, and I hope not take their glory of like, oh, it's so exciting, you guys are doing the climbing, but they have done so much work to make this happen. And again, getting grants and having to do proposals for grants to get funding to go towards a trip like this is huge. That's a huge amount of work and years of getting that to happen. So on their end, absolutely, they had to do a lot. And then on our end, yes, it became quite a lot as well, because this is obviously something that hasn't really been done before at the gardens. So OH&S for us was huge. Having that sort of paperwork there, everything written out and planned. everything prepared for of any potential or possible risk or anything that could possibly go wrong needed to sort of be accounted for, needed to be written down, needed to have a plan. So it was for us as well, sort of months and months of getting this paperwork together, collaborating with managers, collaborating with our OH&S advisor, having sort of a swims and an emergency plan. We ended up having to write down all the directions to the closest hospital and how to get there and the best route because there was no signal there. So all these things, of course, are necessary, but maybe things that when you first get asked, you don't think about. You just go, great, yes, it'll happen. We'd love to come and climb. But a lot of boxes to tick and a lot of things to really make sure that are planned and prepared, which I think, of course, is the best way to do it, especially when you throw in something sort of risky like climbing and abseiling, and then also in a space where there's not really access for another vehicle to come through, not a big vehicle anyway, maybe another four-wheel drive, but not really access for someone to be able to come in and help you, and not really a lot of service for you to call for help. So there was definitely even paperwork in the sense of getting all the equipment we needed, all the radios, all the satellite phones, all those things. It was a lot of preparing and a lot of pre-work to get it to happen. For then a week, this was a week-long trip, 5 days, which was awesome. But the preparation that then goes into just a 5 day trip for us was
Mm.
huge. But so worth it, I'll say. So necessary and so worth it. And I think again on our end, because this is kind of the first trip of its kind, it hasn't happened before. Anything in future now is going to be a lot easier because we have these baselines of how to get it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see many cool animals there?
Yes. Oh my gosh, so many. And Stan got an incredible photo. So we stayed on the last day at an awesome campsite called Turos Cascades. And so to get there, we actually had driven around from one of the cliff faces we climbed on. We could see not the campsite itself, but where it was going to be across the river on the other sort of cliff face on the other side.
Yeah.
So we had to drive all the way out and back around to get to there. And then we were able to walk to this amazing waterfall lookout. And then again, look back on where we had just been climbing, which was awesome. So it's just this beautiful sort of very low, like, how do you say, low key sort of campground, like very natural campground. And they've got beautiful sort of swimming holes and again, the waterfall and hikes just in the natural sort of bushland there. And they're known for having platypus that go in the river. And also, which was so cool, where we were camping, they had greater gliders they just lived there and they're there all the time. And they were in all the trees that night. And so we were spotlighting them, and Stan got an incredible photo of one that I hope he posts, and I'll definitely have to show you too, of this amazing sort of greater glider, which I actually had never seen one before, and it was covered in sort of black fur and it had this massive long tail and these huge ears. Like it was just amazing. It was so beautiful. But then, so that was just at one of the campgrounds. But, on our first day, Ollie and we did see, I think it was a red-bellied black snake, which was all
Oh.
part of it. And I was definitely like, okay. But again, I was in safe hands because Ollie is the person to be with if you're going to see snakes. Lots of, like, we saw a massive blue-tongued lizard, lots of echidnas and wombats, many, many birds. And unfortunately, I was trying to learn because Mitch, who worked for TSC as well, is a bird expert and he knew all the calls and all the birds that he was looking for. And they saw some amazing ones, but I just don't know my birds well enough to be able. I know we saw lyrebirds, but
Oh,
we saw
cool.
much cooler ones than that. But yeah, I'm still learning all my bird names, but lots of wildlife, which was amazing to see. And again, I think part of the kind of fun experience of going somewhere that's not so maybe well traveled and is quite natural and kept, that you get to sort of experience them in their natural environments and they're not really expecting you or maybe so scared of you because they're not expecting to see you. So that was awesome and definitely, yeah, one of the highlights of the trip too.
Yeah, like
And
when you're that deep in there, like that, some of those animals could have never seen a person before.
Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. It's definitely so untouched and so natural that I think you're right. Like, I think for them, it was almost a shock to see us and like, what are you? Like, they were, even some of them were not as scared as I would expect them to be. And again, maybe because they haven't had that interaction before, I'm not sure. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty surreal to be able to go, I think, into a space like that, which, isn't sort of had lots of foot traffic and people in it before, and it's just so as it naturally would have been, and you can just see things. Even, we saw lots of different plant species and things that just are naturally growing there, and they're flowering. They look, for me, something beautiful that you would definitely put in a botanic garden, but they just naturally occur there and thrive there, and they're just flowering because it's the right time of year, and that's how they do it. Like, it was just, oh, so many gems. You could just spend hours in there as well, just exploring and looking at the fungi and the plants and the animals. Like, it's just, yeah, an incredible experience. And again, the whole trip, to be honest, was just like that. It just felt really special and almost like a once in a lifetime, like pinching yourself, like, I can't believe we're doing this and I can't believe it's happening. And then to throw climbing in on top of that was just the best.
Yeah, like that, like when you were saying like a lot of things earlier on, like something that's ticking along in my head is just thinking how crazy it is that like I think it was maybe 5 years ago you decided you want to get into do a horticulture apprenticeship, and then
Yeah.
here you are doing this kind of work. It's insane.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah, you're so right. And that's sort of the reality check of like, hang on, remember, like, yeah, only a few years ago, really, did you get started in this journey? And the same, like, this was my first ever field trip. It is something that is done a lot at the Botanic Gardens. And again, TSC do a lot, but I hadn't been on one before. And I was like, for this to be the first one, I can't even imagine again in another 5 years what they're going to look like. Like, it's going to be just amazing. It's going to be insane.
Yeah. And
So
what are the benefits other than keeping this plant alive of doing this kind of trip? Like,
yeah, that's kind of the main goal. Obviously, because of the bushfires, it's now endangered. And so our main goal is to prevent extinction. Like, that's absolutely not what we want to happen. But also, I guess the potential of sort of surveying the area. Again, we found other species of amazing plants that I personally didn't know were there, and we were able to sort of survey and see how they were doing, and potentially go back and look at other collections if that's possible, or if research needs to be done to see how these species are thriving. I think sort of getting to see how a space like that as well bounces back post fire is really interesting. And sort of getting to see, obviously there are species that struggle, the Eucalypt being one. But even saying that, there were plenty of seedlings that were coming up, which was amazing to see. And other things that had just gone, crazy because of obviously the fire and appreciating the fire. And we found lots of orchids and things, not saying that orchids like fire, but we saw lots of little orchids around and things like that. So I think for me personally, not only were we able to achieve this amazing thing of collecting the seed and, having it stored in the seed bank and as an ex situ collection that we'll get to look after, it was incredibly educational on just sort of the flora and fauna, but flora that just grows naturally in our backyard and where it grows and how it grows and the conditions that it's growing in. I learned so much, and again was with the best people like Stan and Ollie, who just knew everything about their flora, everything about, sort of what grows and what happens in these natural spaces, which I didn't have a lot of experience with. So for me, the knowledge that came out of that, the excitement and sort of the drive of like, I have to continue, I have to do this more. Again, conservation, I think seeing it firsthand, the burnt trees, again, that drive is sort of like, oh my gosh, we have to do something. Like, this is so important. I think too, what was really amazing for us and what I loved was the collaboration of getting to collaborate again. So we had Jackie, who was a local expert who knew everything, it felt like, again, about the flora and fauna there and had seen it through many stages of its life. Getting to connect with her and hear her story, her work previously with other sort of conservation efforts that she's done, the park ranger as well was incredible, sort of hearing all the work that he does in multiple different national parks up there, threatened species, getting to hear all their work and their other projects that they're doing, which there are many and they're all super significant, super important. Having those relationships that we're now going to be able to nurture and, call on each other to collaborate again, or if we need any help from them, they'll be there to help us. The same here. We would love to help them again. Forming those relationships. And I think on a trip like this, it's very bonding. So you really do get to spend really lovely quality time with each other and form really deep relationships and get to know people really well. And everyone on the trip is so like-minded and so on the same page. Again, but it extends even bigger than that. People that weren't on the trip, but Royal Botanic Gardens, who are going to have a huge contribution or are contributing massively to this project. That is now, again, another lovely connection that we will have, and hopefully, we'll get to nurture and collaborate with them as well. And then the Sydney Herbarium, the New South Wales Herbarium, that's another lovely connection that we will get to nurture and grow. So it's all so important. And, collaboration is just the absolute sort of key to success. So that's a massive thing that's come out of this, of these future collaboration opportunities for collaboration. But then also, I think just that bonding experience of being with each other and getting to do the work together is just, yeah, something that I won't forget personally. I loved it. I hope I've answered your question there. Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine because last time you mentioned that you climbed at Melbourne, like you worked with Tim Ubergang, so you're doing
Yeah.
the climbing there. I
Yeah.
imagine he would have been pretty jealous to miss out on that.
He was. He very kindly sacrificed himself because he had some other collecting trips coming up and he thought it was only fair to, allow opportunities for others. And also, that experience that Ollie had was pretty hard to miss. But he was invited, but he had to sort of give that up to go on another trip. So he's still getting some field work in, but he was pretty gutted, I think, to miss out on this. And it was a big one to have to sort of give up. But again, there's already plans for future trips. There will be future things happening, so he needn't worry. But I did feel for him, and again, he's been on this journey with me, the whole time the past few years. So it was definitely a shame that he wasn't able to. But I'm excited because we work so closely together, and again, we climb on the escarpment. So I'm really excited that I can take a lot of the knowledge and experience that I've now got from Ollie and I can share that with Tim and train him up and get him ready for the next one so he doesn't have to miss out next time.
Yeah.
But I mean, like obviously, because we have sort of in an ex situ collection of an endangered South African species growing on the escarpment. And again, that's a big goal of potentially one day together, Tim and I being able to go to South Africa and having a look at that species where it naturally grows on the cliff faces there. So there's big goals and big things hopefully to come. So a small sacrifice, I think it's gonna lead to big things, and he's still gonna be part of this journey and the future journeys with me. He's still involved.
And with planting one of these eucalypts on the escarpment at Melbourne, will you grow it as a seedling and then plant it, or try it in seeds?
I think we're going to do seedlings. Yeah. But so obviously that is the challenge. We have to keep it in really small tube for it to grow well in the escarpment. It's too hard to plant and it just doesn't quite work if it's sort of in a big pot. So it'll be a small seedling, but yeah, I don't think we're going to try directly sow by seed. I mean, it's a thought. It's something I hadn't quite considered. It's something we could try, but seedling is definitely, what we're thinking.
Yeah.
And that actually too was something really interesting that came up again on the trip. This was so TSE continued on for another week or so after we finished with them to look at their other species. And there was another species of Epacris that grows again sort of on cliff faces and steep areas. I don't want to share too much about their work because I think they're still sort of fine tuning it and deciding what needs to happen. But they were hoping to do a little bit of sort of in situ work where maybe reintroducing some seeds of this Epacris back onto some cliff faces where it was naturally growing anyway. And sort of the discussion and the challenge around, these cliff faces are even more tricky than the ones that we have at the gardens, where there's nothing sort of to dig into. Like they're literally growing just in rock. So you don't have the opportunity to plant out a seedling there.
Mm.
And so it was the discussion of, how do you do that with seed, but then not letting the seed sort of blow away, and finding out sort of interesting techniques to sort of allow for that to happen. Of we could sprinkle some seed on these cliff faces, but still keep them in place and give them the best opportunity to grow.
Yeah, you
Um,
need some sort of sticky thing like they do with hydro seeding, like that
yeah,
egg cartons kind of material.
right. Yes, I think you're right. So that's what, from that sort of discussion, someone mentioned, oh, I think they do something like that in Hawaii, very similar, where I think they have like a sticky glue thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense because then it can kind of protect it
Yes.
and sort of add like a layer of mulch as well.
Yes. Keep it sort of, yeah, sticking there, but you're right, protect it and allow it to sort of take root almost where it
Yeah.
wants to grow, but it's tricky for it to stay there. So we'll have to chat with you more too, because this is sort of the interesting discussions that come from it, of like, okay, how can we do this, and how can we, again, without interfering too much, but give seeds the best sort of opportunity to grow where they want to naturally.
Mm.
Um, that's so interesting. Yes, we'll have to talk more, because I just started sort of looking into it and thinking, how does it happen? But I think you're right. It does happen, and people do this work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool. Just the like when you talk to people about how big the horticulture industry is and all the different roles you can go in,
Yeah.
they'll list off a heap of them and then wouldn't have a clue about what you've just done and that kind of work that people are doing. It just blows me away how long you can be in the industry and still be learning about different parts of the industry.
It's so true. And actually, you're so right. Even me starting had no idea. I didn't even expect that I would end up in this. It all just very naturally happened. But I have to be honest, like, there's just always something. It's the kind of industry where you could never get bored, and you can kind of just follow your passion, and you're amazed at where that's kind of led to, and the work that people are doing in such niche areas. It's incredible. And it's so rare, I think, to have sort of an industry like that, where I think there's just so much potential of areas you can move into. There's so much to do and so many things you could really deep dive and sort of nerd out on. It's really lovely to sort of have that, of like, I don't think I would ever be bored in this job. I don't think I'll ever need a career change, because there's just always something new to learn or to try or to research, or a new plant that's really interesting, that's got all these sort of adaptations or whatever. Like, oh, it's something that I love so much about the industry, and we're so lucky to be involved, I think, in a space like that. And you must hear some really interesting stories too, doing your podcast and stuff.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, well I would never have like known about the stuff you're doing without doing the podcast. So it all started from talking to Andrea and she recommended you and then that's just how it goes from there.
How crazy how it happens. And I'm so grateful that I get to sort of share it with you, because again, it's something that, you're kind of on the journey with me now. It's just sort of naturally unfolding again, and I hope continues to progress. And again, I'm thinking drones are in the near future. So hopefully maybe next time I'm on, it'll be talking about drones.
Yeah, well that was something I was going to ask about. Like, is that how they saw it? Like, did they fly a drone down and look at it and they know that it's flowering and that sort of thing if they use drones?
That's such a good question. No, so not in this instance. They were able, and we were probably lucky in the sense that the cliff face we were on sort of had a point that you were able to look over and actually see the trees. Again, on the second day, we sort of found more that we didn't know were there, and that of course comes from climbing. And I think that was one of the risks again, of like, we didn't know what was down there, we didn't know what we were facing, we did know the trees were there, but in some instances you might not. But we did discuss how drones sort of would be the next step. And when I was in the conference in Singapore last year, I met with an amazing man, again from Hawaii, who is sort of leading the way in Hawaii in both conservation and drones for conservation. And he sort of spoke about how drones are obviously used in that way to already go to a cliff face where maybe you can't see what's growing there, survey the plants, see if they're flowering, see what's sort of happening, also measure the sort of distance of the cliff face so you know how much rope you need to bring to climb. But also, he had progressed so far where the drones that he was now working with actually could collect the seed. So the drone that he had two arms, and one had a seed bag that he would put over the seed, and then another sort of cutting arm, so that you wouldn't even have to climb, and he would bring that back to him safely on the ground.
That's insane.
How insane! He had progressed it that much that it sort of started, I think, with, and again, some instances they still had to climb, but also now they could also do the collecting.
Yeah, well, I'd be best to stay away from that industry because I've crashed my drone about 4 times. So we,
Well, I mean, maybe you're well practiced now.
I am. I
For
know.
it.
I know the limitations of it very well.
True. It would be a little scary, wouldn't it, of this probably very expensive drone.
Yeah.
You can't crash it on this cliff face. It's there's a lot riding on it.
Yeah, they probably cost a little bit more than the one I got.
Probably a little bit, I imagine. I mean, I don't know, but I reckon it'd be
Yeah.
more.
Well, you mentioned when we organised doing this chat, you said it'll only just be a short episode, but I think it's gone about the same time as what the last one did. Because it's just, yeah, and I could keep going for another hour. Like,
Thank
it's
you.
so just so fascinating to hear about.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we were able to sort of chat, and that it's something that excites you, because it's so lovely being able to share something that I'm excited about too with someone who feels the same way. So the same, I thought, oh, I hope I'm gonna have enough to say here, but the same, I feel like I could just talk for another hour. Like just yeah, being able to share with you is so much fun. And again, I'm really grateful that you've had me back on here.
Is there anything in the future that you know that might be coming up or potentially like a,
Yeah, I hope so. I think there's definitely now some more field trips already in our mind that we're going to do more climbing and abseiling. Again, I think the sort of big goal would be the South Africa, but I think that'll be a few years down the track. But to go to South Africa and actually sort of work with and probably more survey this endangered species where this all started, that's growing on the escarpment, that would be huge to be able to do that with Tim. But I think for now, more smaller and still collaborations of working with species that are endangered or threatened for whatever reason, and assisting with surveying, or if they need collecting for backup sort of specimens in herbariums and things like that. We want to do more of that work. Watch the space with drones. I mean, it's an expensive area, so I don't know how soon we'll be progressing to that, but I'm definitely going to be looking into it more. But I also have to say, I mean, things just come up. It's amazing how quickly sort of things happen. So I'll keep you posted. I feel like we're just at the beginning now, and I'm really excited to sort of see where this leads to, because I think it's going to be, yeah, very fun and very exciting and meaningful, of course.
yeah, yeah, that's like the added bonus. So, like it's fun to do, but it's also
That's
yeah, it's got a value
also
in it.
important, yeah, which I think is just, the cherry on top that is very important and fulfilling, I think, to contribute to something like that. It's just, yeah, amazing to kind of have it all, really.
Yep. Well, once again, absolutely love chatting with you, Amy. Thank you much. Thank you very much for coming back on to share your story, and I'm looking forward to having you on again to find out what you get up to next.
Thank you. I can't wait for the next one. Thank you again for having me.